All right, guys, we're going to talk about building a high leverage land investing business. Now, this is like a framework or I guess a term that I coined because it's what I want. And I think it's probably what you want if you're watching this video too. A lot of folks want to talk to you about how to go get a deal or how to make some, passive income from owner financing properties. But no one actually talks about how do you build a business that actually produces the lifestyle that you want. And it has not a lot to do with just the strategies. They matter, the technicalities of what kind of deals you go after. Like that stuff matters to some extent, but it's really about how you architect this thing, how you build this thing. And what we're looking to do is create leverage. And leverage just says if I put in an input, I get a lot of output. So imagine if you work 1 hour in your business and you have a lot of leverage, you could make $10,000 for that 1 hour. Or if you're in a very low leverage environment, maybe you only make $100 for that hour. It's, how can we get the most bang for our buck in our business? But even beyond that, I lived the life for a long time where I lived in San Diego. I was building my business. I was stuck in one location. I was doing everything. That's not what I wanted. It throttled my impact and it throttled just frankly my freedom. And I wanted to be mobile. I wanted to be anywhere in the world and still have my business work. And I wanted something that had some legs to it, some scale to it. And I want to have more impact. And impact looks like everything. It's personal impact in your life that ripples out to others in your sphere. It's setting an example of what's possible for those around you or colleagues, like it's pushing the envelope. And so you need leverage to do that. Now, there's kind of 4 ways to think about leverage in the traditional sense. There's capital, there's labor, there's code, and there's media. And that comes from a gentleman named Naval Ravikant. Really what we're going to focus on here today is labor. But beyond that, we're not just going to touch on the labor piece. We're going to touch on kind of a 3-point framework, which is eliminate, automate, delegate. Okay. This is kind of like a 3-point framework that I learned from Clint Turner a long time ago when I went through his mastermind. And it was something that was just said in passing that's always kind of like rang in the back of my head. And I've used it as a kind of a guiding compass for how we build businesses inside of Leah and how I built my business. And so we're going to jump through that. Now, there was a very wise man who, unfortunately, I can't remember his name, said, give me a fulcrum long enough and I'll lift the world. And that is true. That's the power of leverage. And you guys can see that in this cute little photo right here. So let's jump into it. Okay. Now, I'm going to be using some Leah members as examples and talking about, doesn't matter. I will fill in the blank. You don't have to be a Leah member for this stuff to resonate. So it'll still be valuable no matter where you're at in your land investing career. Okay. Now, when we think about the kind of origin story of your land business, you typically have no leverage. The only leverage that we really have is elimination, which we'll talk about here. But one of the things I always say is in your first 6 to 12 months in this business, if you're running it appropriately, you're stuck in what I call the skill phase. Okay. So you're acquiring skills. And everything is a one-to-one input-output relationship, right? We're going to go through some examples of what that looks like. And over time, you start to move from, okay, I'm doing all the things and I'm developing these skills. And the more skills I acquire, the more money I make in my land business. And then you start moving over to, okay, we've assembled these skills. Okay, we know how to get off-market deals. We know how to talk to sellers. We know how to dispo deals. And then it moves to, can I create leverage on top of that skill? So my knowledge base, stuff that I've learned, I can transmute that to a team and this thing can have some legs of its own. So let's dive into just a couple of examples of what that looks like. So these are all Leah members that I would consider to still be in the skill phase. Now, these are very skilled land investors. They're skilled Leah members. They're all individually badasses on their own right. So none of this is to say they're lesser than because they're in the skill phase. No, by no means is that true. These people are savages who are moving from this hand-to-hand combat to building a real business. And so, it's just interesting to kind of see what's possible. I typically say, people on the skill end of the spectrum, if you're following the Leah model, making 200 to 400K your first year, if you're exceptional, is possible. It's totally possible. You're going to be working your butt off, but it's totally possible. There's a gentleman named Mike inside of Leah who encompasses this perfectly. Mike came from a construction background, no real estate experience, no land experience, and came in here and just had a heck of a lot of work ethic and has built a sizable 6-figure business. And he got to 6 figures in profit in under a year, again, with no real estate context. This guy just had a lot of elbow grease. He had the right operating system. And frankly, the dude just wasn't scared to pick up the phone and work a deal to its bone. Well, we'll talk about that in a future video in terms of how to beat the land investing game in 2025, kind of the stuff that I see that's sticking out to me. He just landed a deal that netted him, I think it was a buy for $22,000, sell for $58,000, something along those lines. total net of 29 grand on one deal. If you're a solo operator and you're running this thing on your own, you could expect to land 2 of those deals a month, 3 of those deals a month. They won't all sell the same month, you know what I mean? But getting 2 to 3 contracts that have similar yields is very possible. You just landed a deal that has $119,000 spread on it. So that's what it looks like. But, he's putting in 40 hours a week would be a minimum, right? He's putting in 50, 60 hours a week. And you got to get to this point where you get escape velocity. It's like the first 2 years, there's so much fervor and vigor, and you're like vibrating faster and faster and faster and faster until slowly you start to get some lift and you start to take off, and this thing starts to become, take on a life of its own. Here's Joe McGuire, another Leah member. They just closed out their first year with us in Leah, $450,000 in profit. That came from 10 deals. So they're going after bigger deals. And they just landed their biggest deal ever, buy for 190, sell for 285, which is pretty awesome. A gentleman named Matt Burrows runs his business very part-time, 140K in his first year. What's crazy is it took him 12 months to ever get his first mailer out. So, taking it very much at his own pace, doing this when he can to piece this together. And that $140,000 came from 27,000 mailers, and he's sold a fraction of his deal. So he's got another 6 figures in his pipeline from the 27,000 mailers, which is pretty awesome. And then you start to see folks move into this more advanced category. We'll talk about what these folks have that's a bit different. John and Kirsten's a husband and wife team. They just landed a big deal, sell for 180K, buy for 80K, on and on and on again. Ben G, $362,000 in gross profit collected in January, another 75K coming in that they're going to collect here to close next week. It just keeps on going, right? I don't need to show you guys all these. So what do these people have that's different? Well, they all have teams. They all have leverage in their land business. Frankly, that's it. Now, if we scroll over to someone like Preston Drake, you'll start to see people that, like I said, they become like 3-dimensional land investors. They start looking at deals from different lenses, right? They're no longer just a one-trick pony. And there's a funny thing that happens. Like Preston started in Leah, was doing the flipping model, did well with it, started working with John Jasniak, learned the subdivide model, stopped flipping, realized, okay, that's kind of a crazy notion for most people. So it's come back around full circle and is flipping and subdividing and developing. And, it's partially creating leverage through building the team. And then it's also building leverage through elimination and in some cases addition to become a well-rounded land investor to where, this is a 7-figure deal from one flip. That's not going to happen in the beginning. And you typically need a team to take this stuff on. So yeah, kind of some inspiration, I guess, the life cycle that folks go through. Okay, so let's talk about the first point. So when you're getting started, the first place that we're going to create leverage is through elimination. And really the easiest thing to eliminate are things that don't work or things that just don't work that well. Like to become successful in this business, really you should just find a winning model that has proven itself to work and hitch your wagon to that and do that until you're successful and then start building on top of that, right? So inside of Leah, what that looks like is we go after mid-market properties, deals that net us 10K, 20K, even upwards of 6 figures per deal. We're working with properties that are usually no more than $25K to $250,000 as a list price. That's kind of our sweet spot. We're very selective about the markets that we work in. We say no to way more markets than we say yes to. We use one marketing method to start, which is direct mail. We use one pricing strategy to start. Everything is just kind of synthesized to like just one thing that's proven itself to work. There's a lot of ways to make money in land, but it's a lot easier to find a proven model and just become super proficient at that. So that's the first way that we're going to create leverage. We're going to eliminate. I see a lot of people that jump around from different strategies. They're trying to do a little subdividing, a little entitling, a little distressed acquisition, a little owner finance, and they all work. Some work better than others for sure. Some definitely work better for others for beginners as well. But it's your duty to find what resonates, what's going to get you to where you want to go, and look at the pros and cons of all the strategies, right? When we look at Leah compared to other models, it's like there are pros and cons to everything, right? We focus almost all of our energy and attention to the top of the funnel here. We find that this is where all the value is created, where a lot of the old school land investing models focus on the bottom of the funnel. And simply what that means is they go after markets that have a lot of inventory where it's easy to acquire land. They're going after cheap properties that are easy to negotiate. Sellers want to get rid of them. And then they spend a lot of time trying to dispo these things creatively. And I just think at that point that there's just not much value being created there. But the good news is someone running that model, you don't need a big marketing budget. You don't need to be good on the phones at all So, and it's not like data heavy or data intensive, but there's a real cap to that model. You really don't see many people running the, buy for $3,000, sell for $6,000 that are doing over 15 to 25K a month in pure profit. It happens, but it is very rare. When we look at our model, it's marketing heavy, it's market selection heavy, it's acquisition heavy. You've got to be comfortable being on the phones. You got to be comfortable getting deep on data, and you got to be comfortable doing a lot of work on the front end that doesn't yield instant results. When you're following this kind of old school model here, you could slap together a mailer in Mojave County and get it sent out tomorrow with an hour of work and start getting phone calls in 4 weeks. Like, it's super easy. Where this model here, you might not get your first mailer out for 4 weeks or 8 weeks or 12 weeks. And even then, it could still take another 3 months before you see the fully weighted results. Because typically we'll send a campaign to get a deal or two. We're not getting this tsunami of deals coming our way. And so for some folks, it just doesn't resonate, right? For people that are looking for quick wins, kind of quick dopamine hits, and looking to not have a whole lot of work on the front end, something like this is a much better fit. And this model here, it actually carries more risk, because we spend more on marketing to acquire a deal. And if you're sloppy and you're reckless and you don't pay attention to detail, you can absolutely lose your shorts on marketing. You could lose all of your money. And so it's like, know thyself, right? The one is not necessarily better. It's just relative. It depends on what's better for you. So, when we kind of compare and contrast the old way versus the new way, if you will, the old way, little attention to market selection, typically focused on deals 3K to 30K, no acquisition process, not focused on ROAS, usually focused on kind of one-dimensional land investing, typically no team, no real leverage, heavily focused on disposition. So if you look at a lot of these land investors, a lot of their time goes to working leads from Landflip, from land.com, from Facebook. Like, that's where most of their day is spent. When we look at the new way, the Leo way, if you will, mastery at the top of funnel, mid-market deals, focus on ROAS, three-dimensional land investing. You kind of work your way up to the 3 dimensions, which would be cash flips, double closes, and owner financing. Eliminate, automate, delegate to build a high leverage land business. Minor focus on dispositions, yada, yada, yada. You get it. Now, there's a cap to this model as well. Typically caps out, depends on the person, right? But call it 150K, 400K a month. There's like one person I know that's at the upper reaches of that. Most people are going to be even less than that, 50 grand a month, 100 grand a month in profit. So these are, outlier figures. But again, most people that are running this old way, these numbers are also outlier figures. I don't know that many people that are really crushing with that old model. In fact, a lot of times they cut their teeth here and they jump over to something different. And so as we jump into this deal here, this is going to do a good job to kind of paint the next 2 stepping stones, which the next would be automation. And then the third point would be delegation. So what's interesting is there's still not much automation in the land business. And, we've kind of tried our hand at some of this stuff by using code to create leverage with Land Insights. But by no means is this like an automated business. There's little pieces that we can automate, but it's still very much an elimination and a delegation game as I see it. So we'll go through a real deal for my business that I think will be interesting. So this is a deal that took a long time to put together. So we selected Bastrop County, Texas, Q4 2022, okay? And back then it was a much better market than it is today. You guys can see the market statistics nowadays. It's got a lot of inventory. The sell-through rates aren't bad. Like 122% in the last year is not terrible. 54 pending. There's just a lot of active supply out here, 528 active listings. And you find that a lot with Texas nowadays. A lot of these states, or a lot of these counties rather, are just kind of saturated with active listings. Anyways, it looked like a better market back then. And so, prior to marketing, we go through and remove all the negative property and ownership characteristics from our data set. And we automate that, right? It's automated through Land Insights. So negative property characteristics, flood zones, wetlands, weird shape, all that jazz. Negative ownership characteristics. People get this confused. They think I'm talking about out of state or they bought recently. No, I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about literal negative owners, like owners that have no chance of selling to us. Your local waste municipality, the local utility company, BLM land. That makes up a lot of people's data, and those people are never going to do business with you, right? So we remove both those from our data set. You can do that manually, or we automate it inside of Land Insights. And this is when we start to kind of move into the delegation phase, okay? So that's like a little glimmer into the automation, but this is the delegation phase. And this is like a really good case in point of, I just don't think this is possible without a team. But even further, if you look at the time invested on my side, even if this was possible, the amount of time that this would take to put together, if it was just me or even me and a VA, it's just simply not possible. It's just not a fair assumption. So we landed in our CRM May of 2023, came from cold texting. Within minutes, our team had put together our initial due diligence and underwriting. Again, it's the benefit of having a team that's instantaneous. So our speed to lead is way faster. We're trying to typically get a hold of them within the first 15 minutes. Usually that bleeds over into the first hour. But, just that difference between someone with and without a team is a remarkable difference in terms of the speed to lead that we can hit, which changes the number of people that pick up the phone, which changes the number of deals that we get. Simply put, right? It's really hard to run a super efficient land business without that team in place. So went through our underwriting on the deal, and then we moved through the Leah acquisition process. So what's crazy is it took almost 2 years to get this deal. This is inside of our CRM. You guys can see all the touches back and forth. It's a blend of mainly phone calls, but a lot of text, some email. This is going from oldest to newest. So it kind of just keeps on going and going and going. And we re-underwrote this multiple times. We talked to realtors, like a lot of moving parts here. In fact, I ended up not showing all of it because it just goes on for so long. There was over 100 plus additional touches in this cycle here. November 14th of 2024, I got the date wrong there. We got the contract signed. Finally, the deal was signed for $92,000. Here's the screenshot of the contract here. It's a cash close. So here's what's really interesting though, and this is where the leverage part really becomes like very, very clear, okay? So the seller initially wanted $315,000 for the parcel when they first reached out to us. Now, I could make a whole video about why most people would disqualify this lead when that should have been disqualified just because the seller wanted a high price. Most people fall for that trap. It's a trap, so don't fall for it. Now, during the process with the seller went to rehab. Our son passed away, had a stroke, fell in hard financial times. And even when we were closing the property, unfortunately, the seller ended up in the hospital at the same time and actually had to sign in the hospital. So it was like a really tumultuous, tough, crazy situation. We had 5 different contracts that were sent out before we finally got one signed. We were competing initially with multiple land investors that had other offers out. And that's something that I find very interesting, right? Where are they now? Where were they the rest of the negotiation? Gone. But in the beginning, they were showing up. And that's such a good case in point, whether it's a lack of skill or knowledge, or maybe just a lack of manpower to be able to stay in the fight for that long. I find that to be pretty interesting. You guys can actually see too, in the first message the seller sent to us, they said, hey, we've got other offers on the table. There's investors looking at the property. And quickly, they just all disappeared, which is really what you're dealing with in the land business. It's pretty damn typical. There's junk on the property. So we haven't had to pay this yet, but it looks like it's going to be $7,000 to clear off the junk from the property. There's boats and cars and trash and stuff like that. Funnily enough, one of our acquisition managers, Jordan's going out to the property this weekend. He's going to be in Austin, Texas, and he's going to go walk the property. So the seller is supposed to have all the junk removed by Monday. If they don't, we have to pay the $7,000 to the junk clearing company, but they said that they're going to get it done. So we'll see what happens there. And I'm filming this in February, so it still hasn't been cleared. We closed 60 days ago, and there's still trash on the property. We still haven't even been able to list the thing, right? Again, it just shows you what goes into these deals. And before we could close, we had multiple title issues that we had to solve on the deal. So a lot of moving parts. Now, probably we'll end up selling $250,000. So it's a good deal. What's interesting though, is that in total, this whole deal from start to finish, I probably have 10 minutes of actual time into this deal. Now, we've gone through many calls about it, so it's hard to quantify what that time is. But that's a good case in point of leverage, right? We wouldn't have gotten this deal without having the team in place. We wouldn't have gotten the deal without having the skill in place and knowing what to do and what kinds of properties to pursue and what kind of markets to pursue. And if I didn't have all that, somehow by a miracle chance, I just had unlimited time, I could probably only do one of these every couple of months. And so it allows you to scale beyond your own capabilities. And that's really the power of what we teach inside of Leah. Our whole premise is that, someone joins Leah and we're looking to master the skills of the Leah land flipping model. And it depends on the person, but that's typically the first 6 to 12 months. Sometimes it's the first 24 months. Again, it depends on the person. But the North Star from there as they graduate from Leah is, okay, cool. Can we go turn that skill set into a leverage system or a real business or a business that actually provides freedom? Because what I've seen in my own experience is that's what I want. And I think that's what most people want, right? They don't want just a job. They want something that provides a bit of freedom and has more impact and has some legs to kind of run and grow on its own. And that's really what we're going after. Now, how do we actually do that? It's like one thing to say that, but it's like, how do you actually do that in practice? And so what I learned a long time ago is that we learn things through feedback loops, right? And for most people, the feedback loop, if they're even paying attention, which some people aren't, is the market. So the market is your teacher, right? You send some mail out and it slaps you on the wrist or says, good job. But it's a slow, painful teacher, and it usually likes to take your money. It's pretty mean. It's definitely vindictive. And so what we want to do to master these skills and to eventually grow a business is, can we create that feedback loop outside of the market? And so we coined a framework that we call Learn, Implement, Coach. And so the way we structure this is that, when you first join Leah, you're going through the learning, which is 300 plus hours of content inside of Leah. So you're going and learning. But that's not good enough. No one just learns and like, oh, I watched a module and now I'm a land investor. It doesn't work. That's why courses on their own are a fraction of what's actually going to move the needle for someone, right? So the next step is you need to actually put rubber to the road and go through homework assignments. So kind of to boot with that content, the folks are going through the homework assignments. But again, that's good. It's just not enough. Because how do you know if you did it correctly? And that's when you now move into the coach area. So it's actually taking the work from those homework assignments, the markets generated, the pricing, the deals, whatever it may be, and actually having that reviewed by a team of coaches to mitigate risk, but also to compress time, right? And one of the interesting things that I see is that people that I know are going to be successful, they pay for speed. They want speed. It's like, yeah, you're telling me I can mitigate risk and compress time? Cool, let's do that. Like, I want to move quick. Successful people just have this itch to them. It's just like a little bit of a burning edge where it's like, I'm trying to go. And you got to be careful with that. You got to rein it in. It can definitely get you in trouble if you're trying to go too quickly. But you need a little bit of that, like, I guess you could just call it ambition. On the flip side, there's folks that are very waffly. I'll try some things and maybe we'll see. And yeah, it might work for some, but that road is usually littered with pain because we are relying on a slow mechanism to be our teacher, one that wants to take our money. And why is that the case? Well, because you're competing against the pros. Like when you go into the market, you're not competing against sellers or realtors or whatever. You're competing against other sharp land investors who have paid their dues. And so it very much is a battle out there. And so my whole premise is, let's take the feedback loops to learn the right skill set to create leverage and eventually build a business. And let's bring that to the market and let's dominate, because most people just aren't willing to do this. In fact, most people aren't even willing to think like this. So if you replicate this mindset, if this resonates and you've got some vigor, well, kudos. I think you're going to go far. And if you want to take the next step for free, we just launched our free Facebook group. It's Land Investing Accelerated. I'll put the link down below. Come hang out with us. There's all sorts of exclusive content in there, and I think you're going to love it. Cheers.